What's up? So today I'll be recapping Cobra Kai Season 3. We already did Cobra Kai Season 1 and 2 last night, so today it will be all about Season 3. So Season 3 basically picks up with Miguel in a coma fighting in the All Valley tournament. But then when he wakes up, when we pan out, he's still in a coma. So then we see Johnny, and he's at Applebee's, and he will not leave. So we learn that Tori was expelled, Robbie was expelled, but is still on the run, and yeah. But then before we can, they're still pushing through for Miguel to get out of the coma. But then some jerk decided to change the channel on Johnny. And Johnny's like, hey, change that back. And then that dude's like, oh, watch it on the news. And he's like, I don't have the news. I don't have my phone. And threw it away. And he's like, oh, sorry for you. And he's like, change it back. And he's like, no, the football game is on. And everyone would rather watch a football game than watch about a kid in a coma. So, yeah. So Johnny basically walks out and beats up all these guys, beat up on Johnny, and he ends up, and he's like, hey, you're that guy that was on Applebee's. Don't you have any other place to go? And he's like, no. So then we see, so Miguel's still in his coma. And so we learn that everyone, Miyagi-Do, the name of the LaRusso auto group has been, non-existent. No one comes around to their dojo anymore since the whole school fight. Sam has been expelled, but Tori was out of jail. Tori was in juvie, but I guess she got out to take care of her sick mom. But that should not be allowed, because wouldn't have her brother, been put in foster care system or something, because her mom's, as we learned, Tori's mom is sick, so how is her brother allowed to be in a house with a sick mom and a dropout high school student? That should not be allowed. So her brother should not be in this season, because he should be explaining that, just protective services. But as we learn, the adults in this show are a bunch of jerks, because the adults in this show do nothing, which I'll explain later. The adults in this show do nothing, and they do nothing, and it's just terrible that it's wasted on this show, that these adults do nothing. So Johnny's still in prison. And he's talking to the cop, and the cop's like, hey, Miguel won't make it out. And he's like, what do you mean won't make it out? And he's like, if there's a kid in coma, the coma always wins. So Johnny decides to bust out of there, decides to bail him out of prison and put on doctor, since he could just say Miguel's his son, makingly it's his son. So he pretends to be in a head injury, so he sees Miguel, and Miguel's still in the coma, of course, and Miguel's still in the coma, of course, and Miguel's and he's like, hey, you can win this, kid, you just gotta fight this coma. So and a woman just shows up saying, hey, you're not allowed to be in here. These adults, they're so bad at their jobs in this show. I guess it isn't meant for hilarity, because these adults are so bad at their jobs in this show. So we learned that Yasmin is back in the season, and so is Kyler. Yasmin was in Paris for a bunch of times, and Aisha has been not in the season. Aisha is not in the season anymore because her parents decided to send her to a private school and move away after the school fight. So at least Yasmin gets redemption this season because, and Kyler is in the season too. But the only person I care about that's returning is Yasmin now, because Yasmin at least gets redemption. Kyler's a jerk throughout this entire season. Yasmin at least gets some personality and gets a redemption arc. I guess that wedgie that Aisha gave her some a sensibility about what she was doing, and she's now a different person. And she's, and now she can also relate to Dimitri because he's being bullied, of course, by the Cobra Kais now. So, yeah, so I guess she can relate to Dimitri, how it feels to be alone and bullied. Because his only friend is now an aggro jerk. His only friend, who was Eli, is now Hawk, and he's totally now mean to him. So, he's alone. He has no friends. Miguel's in a coma. He has no friends, except for Yasmin now. And Moon, because we see Moon and him and Yasmin and Dimitri hanging out sometimes. So I guess him and Yasmin are now, so Yasmin may get redemptive arc, but Kyler is still the jerk that we saw him in season 1. So Miguel eventually wakes up from his coma, and after that, Kreese decides to kick Bert and anyone who doesn't want to feed a snake to a mouse to a snake out of Cobra Kai. So I guess Kreese is just making cuts of the entire season, and he's like, and Hawk's like, Sensei Kreese, is this the really time we should be making cuts in this? Because, and he's like, yeah, it is. So also they hired Louis back for some reason. I guess they forgave him. They say that he was there for Sam when Sam got injured. So I guess seeing him being there when Sam got injured is enough to hire him back after what his biker gang did to Johnny's car blowing it up. I guess that's always forgiven now after one season of him not being in it. They could have had him, and then we could have seen him. But no, again, the show, this is another show where they say, oh, he was there for Sam. We don't get to see it, but we'll just tell you, he was there for Sam, and that caused him to earn his trust back. And even Amanda's like, hey, he's a pretty good salesman. And Anush is now, working with Tom Cole. I guess he decided to betray Daniel and put him and sell him down a river for Tom Cole. So the worst guy. So Sam has Tori PTSD. So after Miguel wakes up, Johnny visits him. Miguel basically blames Johnny for all of this, saying that if he wouldn't have shown mercy to Robert Keane, he wouldn't be at risk of not being able to walk again. So, yeah, even Sam comes to see him, but then he's like, hey, and then Sam's like, hey, everyone got a sob story. Doesn't mean they get to be a bully. So, even Hawk showed up. And Sam's like, hey, what are you doing here? And he's like, oh, what are you doing here? And she's like, I'm being here for Miguel. And he's like, I'm being here for Miguel too. And she's like, it's because of what you and your Miyagi did. It's why Miguel's in this. And she's like, I just want to be here to help him. And he's like, yeah, right, princess. So yeah. So Hawk still hasn't forgiven Sam, even though it's Robbie's fault. But it was Sam's fault for starting the fight. It's actually Tori's fault for starting the fight. And speaking of Tori, as I said before, Tori is taking care of her brother and her mom by herself because Child Protective Services doesn't take her brother away. Because I guess they don't care. She also has a terrible landlord who is terrible to her. And she won't come back to Cobra Kai. But Kreese is able to convince the landlord to let her come back, and that's when she comes back to Cobra Kai. And obviously, she's still a psychopath. because that's what they wrote Tori into. But like I said before, one thing of like, Tori has to take care of her brother and her sick mom. So, and she's a dropout high school student because she got expelled. So she's not a high school student anymore, and she still has money from her two jobs. So, and that's not enough money to take care of her mom and her brother. So, how is her brother able to live in a house with the mom and Tori when Tori doesn't have enough money to pay for both of them? Because Tori works at 2 jobs, she doesn't have all that much money, and she's able to take care of both her brother and her mom at the exact same time. Why? How? Child Protective Services should have came in and took Tori's brother away because of course Tori is, not old enough to take care of her brother. Her mom is, but not her. She's only like as we learned from Miguel's mom, Miguel's a 17-year-old kid. So Tori's probably between that age of 17 and 18. So Tori's not between 16 and 17. Tori isn't responsible to take care of her brother. But yeah, so anyway, that was me rambling on about how the adults in this show do not care about one single thing. So anyway, back to the story. For some reason, Chris is important to Tori. Tori is important to Chris for some reason. So yeah, when Daniel learns that Tom Cole wants to buy Miyagi-Do, and he's, not buy Miyagi-Do, buy Lotus Auto, and he wants to, buy, he wants to buy, he's already bought out, Diona won't give Diona, the Okinawa Japanese company, won't give them the funds. Daniel decides to travel to Okinawa, where he went to in Karate Kid Part 2, and decides to learn that it used to not, when Daniel went to Okinawa, it was a village with a bunch of homes. But now that Daniel's returning to 30 years later, as they say, it now looks like a strip mall. And Daniel's like, hey, what happened? It's like Mr. Sato, turned Okinawa into a mall, and he's like, what happened to all the people? What happened to their village? And she was like, they were able to get great jobs. And he was like, this is not like what I remember. But do you know who he sees? His ex Kumiko, who is pretty cool and played by the exact same actress who portrayed her in the original film, which is pretty cool that they got the same actress back. And who did they also get back? The same actor who portrayed Chosen. And it's really cool to see these two. Daniel thinks that Chosen is the same guy he was when he first met him, because he's done that same thing with Johnny. So he's basically no one can change, which kind of being a jerk to him. Just because one guy, Johnny, is a jerk to him, he still thinks Johnny is a bully. He doesn't think no one that bully him will change. So Chosen decides to take him. So Chosen. Yeah, he also went to the place where Kumiko, read him love letters that he sent to Yukie, who also died prior to the season, and so did Sato. So he's like, Chosen's like, before Sato died, he gave him this thing, and he's like, and he touched the thing, and then Chosen's like, don't touch that, and he's like, those are Miyagi's secrets, not for foreigners. And he's like, hey, hold up, bro. Miyagi treated him like a son, not a foreigner. So he basically teaches him the Miyagi pressure point technique, and basically honks him, which is kind of funny that he goes honk, and yeah, honk, and that's pretty funny. That's the same thing that Daniel did to him, and he does it back at Daniel years later, and he also does the pressure point technique, and he's basically like, if your enemy wants to wage war, make sure they can't wage it. So when Daniel comes back to Okinawa, also Anthony, Daniel's son, he lost some weight during the 2-year time jump of this season, because this actor has lost some weight, and it seems like he's not in video games anymore. He's eating a popsicle and not playing on his game his video game. So, wow, even though we haven't seen Anthony in a while, he's got some he's really done some big changes. And it seems like in season 4, he's gonna have a storyline because he's in season 4 with a red shirt. So yeah, so he's gonna have a big storyline in season 4. So anyway, yeah. So Sam's really mad. Amanda finds out that Sam's still doing karate, and she's like, "What are you guys doing here? Go home." And she's like, "What was all that about?" And she's like, "No karate, Sam." And she's like, and Sam just flips out at her, and she flips out at this, like, so, as I said before, Yasmin, Moon, and Dimitri are hanging out with each other when Hawk bees a jerk and kicks the ball right into Dimitri's like a volcano and says, "Oops, sorry." And he's like, "I must have slipped." And he's like, "That took me so hard to finish that." And he's like, and then Sam sees this and tries to stand up for Dimitri, but then the worst character in the entire show, Counselor Black, shows up, and she's like, "Oh, guy, I guess this is for, we're supposed to be fighting, we're supposed to be hugging and not fighting." Counselor Black, you are the worst character on this entire show because you basically do nothing. None of the adults in this entire show do nothing. In this school, I mean. So later on they're like, Cobra Kai show up and she's like, "Hey, this is like," they start kicking the ball in their faces, and the coach is like, "Hey, and stop, like, do something, you coach. Do something. Don't just go, hey, and stop that. Like, do something. Like, come on. If you want them to stop, do it yourself. Do it yourself, coach." That's why these adults are terrible in this show, because they do nothing. They just let it happen. They're letting them fight. They say, "Hey, and stop that," but they do nothing. When the best part of this moment is when Hawk's like, when Eli says, "Hawk, Moon loved you, but she broke up with you because you're a nerd," and kicks him. But that's when the coach is like, "Hey," and she's like, "Coach, this is why I don't like these characters." And doesn't Moon have a boyfriend or girlfriend? Doesn't Moon have a girlfriend? Why is she hanging out with this orange haired guy without her girlfriend? Piper being there. I have no idea. Maybe they broke up. Maybe they're still together. I have no idea what she's flirting with. Looks like she's flirting with this orange guy. But the coach in this episode, or in this season, is the worst. Because this coach could do something and she's like, "That's it. You guys go to Principal Black's office now. Or the principal's office now." But you could have done something. Okay. So, of course, the Cobra Kais get off easy. Well, the Miyagi girls get detention. And then when Sam lashes out Principal Black, she's like, "Oh, you get double detention. Principal Black, you're the worst character. Nothing against the actress. I just do not like this character. I do not like the coach. The adults just do nothing on the show. They suspect, you guys are just going to get along and have fun. But this is a karate rivalry. This is a karate show. You expect them to have fun, but they are not going to have fun. It's a karate show." So Sam's like, "This school sucks," or something. And yeah. So after Daniel comes back, and after Tori PTSD, she decides of Tori trying to drown her, because Tori, even in Sam's dreams, Tori's a psychopath. Sam quits karate forever when Daniel's like, "Hey, we're gonna open." So actually, let's talk about that. Let's talk about the whole Sam quitting. So they decide, after the Cobra Kai decide to steal a girl's tickets, and steal some random girl's tickets, and steal from Chris's work. Sam's like, "That's enough." And he's like, "What are you doing here? What are you guys doing here?" And she's like, "Payback," and gets onto a fight until Tori shows up. And she's like, "Sam LaRusso, where are you?" And Sam just starts having PTSD as the Cobra Kai are telling Hawk to break Dimitri's arm. So, yeah. This is just so crazy. So, yeah, so Miguel, so John, back to the whole Johnny stuff. Johnny takes Miguel. Also, Daniel meets the girl that he met in the typhoon. That he saved the girl from the typhoon. Remember, Yune? She's the savior to all of Daniel's problems because she owns Diona. Because she's the sales of Diona, who Daniel's trying to convince. So all it took for him to do this was to do this adventure. So basically, yeah. So anyway, next, Johnny decides to take Miguel to a rock concert where they sing a where they sing a song, and they decide to be and Miguel's foot starts moving. So after that, he and Johnny train to make sure his foot works, and they throw away the crutches. So Tori and Miguel, or Johnny and Miguel, are just being funny when Tori shows up, and Tori basically blames that. Oh yeah, this was all Miyagi-Do's fault. They're the reason. And Miguel's like, no, this was your fault, Tori. And she's like, you're calling me crazy? And he's like, no. But she's like, yeah, everyone does. And I guess they break up because Johnny just say about Miguel's ex, and says about how Johnny let all of them down, let Tori and Hawk down. So next day at school, they're thinking about what their new karate should be. Strike First karate, Johnny Lawrence karate, yeah. But even with Cobra Kai, but with KK, but then he's like, yeah, KK, but he's like, that's probably a bad idea anyway. So Miguel returns to school, and he's like, El Serpiente or something, I forget what he says. And they welcome back with open arms, but then Miguel learns what Hawk did to Dimitri, he confronts Hawk, and he's like, you broke Dimitri's arm, and he's like, they deserved it for what they did to you, and he's like, this is not what Sensei Lawrence taught you, and he's like, he's not my sensei anymore, and he's like, this isn't you talking, this is Kreese. Kreese is getting in your head, Hawk. Yeah, and even Kyler, who's now joined Cobra Kai. Yeah, speaking of that, forgot to mention that Kyler has joined Cobra Kai. Yeah, and also I think Hawk killed Brooks because so Mitch is off the team because he lost to Kyler, and because Kyler beat him, and then Hawk's like, it's his turn, and he basically just goes. And then Batwoman 2 does the same thing, where he just punches Brooks over and over until he has bleeding on his hand, and he even has a Grim Reaper tattoo on him, meaning his dead relationship with Moon. So, yeah. So, he starts beating him up, and he just starts to blood on his hands. So, that means Brock's dead. Chris just says, hey, can someone pick this guy up or something? So, does that mean Brock is dead? Did Hawk just commit his first kill? I have no idea. We don't even see Brooks again after this episode, so we can probably imagine that Hawk just killed a guy. All because he was a bully to him. So yeah, so back to the thing. Kyler, who's now a part of Cobra Kai, draws a penis on Dimitri's arm, and Yasmin is the only one to write on his cast. So, yeah, I kind of like Yasmin in this season better than her first season appearance because she is way nicer in learning that she's not even, I guess so Sam, so Amanda also slaps Kreese, and the police, as I said, the adults in the show are totally nothing, so they decide, oh, guess what, he's an army veteran, so we can't do anything. Even the cops are worse in the show. I think which are worse in the show, the cops or the adults in this season, because in the first season, they pepper sprayed Johnny, but in this season, they're just not going to look over that Kreese. They're just going to think, oh, Chris is an Army veteran, and what you have to do is take it up with the judge. So they try to get Armand to do something, saying, hey, Armand, you could, like, up the rent. And he's like, Chris gave me more rent than Johnny. Chris is better at rent than Johnny did. And he's like, and yeah, so he's like, so he tries to send in his 2 guys to beat up Chris, but Chris probably kills those guys too, and probably because we never see those guys again or Armand after the season. So he calls Johnny. He's like, deal. He calls Daniel. He's like, deal's off. And he's like, Daniel, your car soon better prepare for a war because now it's open season on them and you, just like he said to Miyagi and Daniel and Karate Kid. And he, for some reason, somehow releases a cobra into the dojo. So yeah, so yeah. So Johnny confronts Hawk and is like, "Hey, I made you what you are, not Chris. Before you were a soft baby, and now look at you. I made you what you are, not Chris. If you want to join my join it in the park." So Hawk does show up, but he also brings Chris, and he's like, "I told you, Cobra Kai for life." And he's like, "Hey Johnny, you can join me. Like, you have one shot here to join me and end all this karate, Eagle Fang karate stuff. Even though Eagles don't have fangs, as Mitch says, or Assface says, but I'm just gonna call Mitch. Even though." So yeah, so he's like, you can quit all this stuff. You can rejoin JoJo, and he's like, my fighters never lose and end up in a coma, and that's when that's when Miguel steps up in front of Johnny, and Hawk steps up in front of Chris, and they're both pounding them back and telling them to go back. So then we get episode 8, which they're training when they learn that the All Valley tournament has been canceled. And they learn that the All Valley tournament has been canceled. And they're like, they can't. He's like, they canceled the All Valley. He's like, what? They can't do that. He's like, yeah, they can. I guess after the school fight, karate just got bad publicity, and now they're just gonna cancel. And he's like, and then Daniel's like, they're just gonna cast karate as the villain. So yeah, so Miguel's like, hey, you guys stand up. You gotta do something. Show that you became a sensei to help kids like him. And yeah, so they get into a huge fight and stuff. So yeah. So yeah. They get into a huge fight, and then Carmen's like, hey, you should save the All Valley. You should save the All Valley. And yeah, you save the All Valley. So he does that, and then Kreese. So yeah, so Kreese stands up and gives this whole speech about how Miyagi-Do is the villain, and how his kids are being attacked by Miyagi-Do, and he's like, hey, this guy is the villain. He broke one of his students' arm, and he's like, a fight that was recorded by your out of control kid. And then it's like, you talk about her daughter, you piece of crap. And then he's like, this man is a psycho, which obviously he is. He's a psychopath, and so yeah, she's a psychopath. We all know, everybody. So yeah, so Amanda leaves, and then he's like, John Lawrence, Eagle Fang Karate. I love this. And he's like, hey, this guy is a liar and nothing. And then Counselor Robert's like, sit down, you guys. You guys are just making this more reason why we should cancel the karate in this valley. And then Miguel shows up saying, hey, and he's like, if it wasn't for karate, he wouldn't have been where he is. He would have been bullied. He would have been swirly, and then Johnny tries to explain what a swirly is, which is super funny because the cop woman's like, "What's a swirly?" And Johnny tries to explain what a swirly is, so it's kind of hilarious. And then Sam shows up, and then they won. Yeah, but Robbie's also having a tough time in juvie because remember he was on the run at the end of last season. Johnny, before all this, Johnny and Daniel tried to team up to stop to find Robbie, but Daniel went to Robbie's mom and Johnny's ex-wife, Sharon Keene, to shouldn't it be Sharon? Shouldn't Robbie's name be Robbie Lawrence? I have no idea. But anyway, went to Sharon Keene to and they get into a whole fight and stuff. So Robbie's on the run and then he talks to his mom, but then Daniel gets him arrested and he's like, "Hey Robbie, I'll come." And he's like, "No, I can't go to jail." And he's like, "It's for your own good, Robbie. You'll get a later sentence." And he's like, "I'll visit you every day." And Robbie being a jerk this season because the court, they make Robbie a complete other ass, aka jerk. He's like, "Don't bother," like Batman. So he's like, "Don't bother." So Robbie's just now ignoring Daniel's call. He's getting beat up in juvie by Sean until they finally become friends at the end. But then when he gets out of juvie, he discovers that Sam and Miguel are an item. Not an item per se. They do get back together at the end of the season after Robbie breaks up with Tori after he tries to attack Miguel. Instead of this time, Robbie breaks up with Sam and says you two deserve each other and joins up with Cobra Kai. So Hawk is basically like, "What's this guy doing here?" Basically, you're the reason why. And he's like, "Hey, yeah." After Bert left, and after Brooks left, and after Mitch left, he's like, "We don't need any more Cobra Kai. This guy's the reason why Miguel was in the hospital." And he's like, as he learned in war, the enemy of your enemy is your friend. So Daniel cuts. So we'll see Allie in this episode, which is really great. So Johnny catches up with Allie and discovers that she's no longer married, even though she's no longer Allie Miller. Sure, she's Allie Miller, even though her husband was a great guy. Johnny calls him an idiot for them divorcing or something, and they go to have fun. They talk about their kids, how her daughter wanted to become like a ballet dancer, and now she's like a rocker. Yeah, there was kind of a theory, as I said in my previous video, that Tori was Allie's daughter, but obviously, as we learned in this episode, that's not the case, and as we learned earlier, that's not the case also. So why does she go as Tori was an I thing? Tori was a Y thing. They stopped doing it after her introduction. Every time she would meet someone, she would just say it's Tori, but they stopped with the Y thing. They just wanted to throw us off. So they're like, they team up and they're like, hey. So they try to team up, but because of the bad blood, they're like, hey. Dimitri's like, "Hey, Cobra Kai are the biggest jerks in all the valley. You used to be a jerk, and you used to be a jerk, and he used to be a jerk, but he didn't join, so obviously he's not a jerk." And he said sorry for all calling them all jerks. And he's like, Cobra Kai is the biggest continent of jerks, led by the king of jerks. So they have to team up to stop them. So while that's happening, Daniel meets up with Allie again. Amanda is my favorite character in this episode, in this entire show. So I hope she gets better. She wasn't as funny as she was in the first two, but this episode redeemed her. As she's like, you're Allie, the one who... Did they tell you about the whole, fighting for the soul of the valley thing? I love Amanda. And yeah, so Bert, for some reason, thinks there's a cat outside, because Bert's like that, and they're like, we don't have a cat. So Bert gets thrown in across, and Bert's like, it wasn't a cat. Then Hawk, Kyler, Tori, and all the other Cobra Kai crash their party. They would obviously get arrested for this, but because the show makes cops and adults seem so dumb that, not against the show, but it's against how they characterize their characters. They're adults in the season that they wouldn't call the cops. It turns out into a breakout fight with Sam PTSD. But Tori's able to use what Daniel said as he was talking to her about what happened with Mike Barnes to defeat Tori. And then Hawk switches sides. He hears what Johnny said to him. He also hears what Chris said to him. And it makes him go on Johnny's side and save Dimitri as Dimitri is about to get his second arm broken. And he's like, I'm sorry about everything. That's how you redeem your character. I'm not mad about this redeem. Yasmin redeemed by becoming Dimitri's friend. Hawk's just redeemed by, he hears what Johnny and Chris are saying and chooses Johnny's side and saves Dimitri, beating up his friend. And Kyler and Miguel is even hearing what Johnny says and gives him enough strength to beat out Kyler. So then Tori and Sam, as I said, so then Tori said, so he's like, it's over, Tori, and she's like, you better watch your back. So then now he's like, oh yeah, you two, there are two sides of the truth. There are your side, and there's the third side, which is the truth. Which is, you guys are more alike than you realize. So, Allie, and then Johnny has a chance to get back with Allie, because of course, Allie's not single, but instead, he chooses to be in a relationship with Miguel, with Mom, and they sleep together. They slept together at the end of the episode of last time. So, but then we see Johnny, but this whole season has been doing Creed's flashback episodes. Seeing how Creed became the psychopath that we hate. You guys may love him. I love Martin Kove. I don't love Creed. I love Martin Kove. Martin Kove is an amazing actor. For his 75-year-old age, Martin Kove is just, a great actor, and it proves that even though he's 75, he still got it with the. We also had a Robbie Fight, which I'm going to explain. Okay, so Johnny busts into Cobra Kai, and sees Robbie training with Creed, and is obviously not happy about this thing. Robbie, what are you doing? And he's like, and Robbie, being the oblivious guy that he is, tries to convince his dad to join up with Creed, saying, listen to him, Dad, he knows what's best for you. Robbie, you were kind of a jerk in season, so you just don't talk at all because you were kind of a jerk. So he's like, hey, here's all the 3 generations of Cobra Kai, and we're gonna melt this snowflake generation. And then Johnny just starts beating up Creed. And Robbie just says, Dad, stop. Like, Robbie, you're not going to do anything. And Johnny's about to beat up Crease when Robbie steps in and says, for all his life, he hated Johnny. He blamed himself for why Johnny left. But Crease tells him, if he can't be his own worst enemy, he'll be Johnny's, and fights him. But then he's like, Robbie, I don't want to fight him. He's like, you're weak, which is kind of the worst line ever because he just saw him beating up his sensei. So calling him weak is one of the worst lines ever, as Johnny, beats him up, but then knocks him unconscious. But then Chris tried to kill him, but then Daniel showed up saying, how dare you attack my children? And those kids or something. But then he uses the pressure point technique that Chosen did to disable his arm. And then Sam and Miguel just show up out of nowhere, who are kind of back together at the start of this episode because they kissed, and I guess Miguel and Sam are now dating again. So cool that Miguel and Sam broke up, and now in the 3rd season they're finally back together. So I hope season 4 doesn't ruin this relationship as it did in season 1. So I hope they're together for the entire show of season 4 to season 5 to season 6. How long the show goes on for. So Robbie's just like, get out of here, all of you, and still sides to Crease because Robbie's an oblivious guy who kind of a jerk. He's an oblivious jerk. So John Kreese calls everyone's favorite villain from Karate Kid 3, Terry Silver, because we know Terry Silver is going to be in Karate Kid 3, so... yeah, that's what happened. So, anyway, so yeah. So they play a cover of Into the Air Tonight by Phil Collins. It's a cover, it's not him actually saying it. And boy, is it not that good. Boy, does it not sound as good as the original. Why couldn't they use the original? Is it copyrighted to use the actual song? And yeah, and now we get the reunited. Now we get Hawk and Dimitri reuniting, Nathaniel and Bert reuniting, Mitch and Chris reuniting, and then they say, "Are you guys ready? Let's begin to end the episode." So Johnny, Daniel, and now co-senseis, and that's the ending of season 3. Who's excited for season 4 after this? So what did I think of season 3? I thought it was pretty good. The adults are just so not good in this season. Like, cops are not good. The coach is not good. Principal Blatt is just an awful character. Okay, she was in one episode of season 1, and then they, for some of season 1, and then they just brought her back with the rest of the season 1 characters, except for Aisha and Stingray. I hope Aisha returns at some point, because she was pretty cool. But that's it for this video. I hope I see you next time, and excited to start season 4? I am, because season 4 will gain the return of everyone's favorite villain, Terry Silver, and we'll get to see Johnny meet him for the first time, Daniel reunite with him, and we'll see how the All Valley tournament does, because if Johnny and Daniel don't win this All Valley, their dojos will have to be closed down for good, and they'll have to leave the valley. But if Kreese loses, Cobra Kai will be finally shut down for good, everybody. And yeah, I don't think it's going to be shut down because they're just doing this because it's called Cobra Kai. So if it gets shut down, what new villain are they going to make up for Daniel and Johnny team up again? Why'd they do this? Like, I get they wanted to get shut down for good, but the show would have to end if that happened. Because they could just take like a random villain and just put into the show as new villain. Daniel and Johnny have to stop. But Kreese is the ultimate bad guy. And for them to just say, yeah, if he loses, he'll have to leave. It's just like, oh, Kreese, the ultimate bad guy, will be finally taken down, and then there'll be no left for show. So, but anyway, I'll see you next time for season 4 when we start those reviews on the Eagle Fan Kids YouTube channel.